The conduit was leaking again. I had been awake for 19 hours. My back was aching from crouching in a maintenance corridor half the size of a closet, and the hyperdrive relay I was trying to fix had been designed by engineers who clearly hated the people who would one day have to repair it. The smell of burnt coolant was so thick I could taste it. My knuckles were bleeding from where I had scraped them against a bolt casing, and the countdown timer on my wrist was reading 31 minutes. 31 minutes before the Terran colonial convoy was scheduled to depart Conclave Station. 31 minutes before 32,000 people aboard 7 ships needed that hyperdrive to work. No pressure. I was Sergeant Mechanic Dara Osei, 3rd Fleet Engineering Division, and I had been stationed on Conclave Station for 8 months. The station sat in neutral space between 4 different galactic territories, which meant it was always busy, always loud, always smelling of a dozen alien food stalls, and always producing mechanical problems for someone like me to fix. I did not mind. I liked fixing things. I was good at it. What I was not good at, as my commanding officer liked to remind me, was reading a room. I was reaching for my secondary torque tool when something hard and heavy struck my toolbox. Metal clattered across the floor of the docking bay. Wrenches, seal rings, pressure clips, everything scattered and slid under the feet of people walking past. I pulled myself out of the conduit, hit my head on the way up, and turned around. There was a group of beings standing behind me. At the center was a woman, humanoid, tall, with deep violet skin and silver hair that moved like it had a slow wind running through it, even though the air in the bay was completely still. She wore robes the color of deep water, layered and shimmering, with patterns that seemed to shift when she moved. Around her stood 12 attendants, all of them in formal uniform, all of them looking at me like I had just done something terribly wrong. One of her attendants had walked through my toolbox. I looked at my tools scattered across the floor. I looked at my countdown timer. 29 minutes. "Hey," I said, "watch where you're going. I'm working here." I said it the same way I would have said it to anyone. A fellow mechanic, a dock supervisor, a cargo handler who wasn't paying attention. Plain, direct, a little tired. Not rude, just honest. The woman in the robes went very still. I didn't notice at first because I was already picking up my tools. But then I noticed something strange. The docking bay, which was always full of noise, of cargo lifts beeping, of alien traders arguing, of announcements being broadcast in 6 languages, had gone quiet. Not completely quiet, but the kind of quiet where people stop what they are doing and start paying attention to something else. I stood up slowly. The woman was watching me. Her attendants were watching me. And now, from the corners of my vision, so was nearly everyone else in that section of the bay. A Vreth dock worker 3 platforms over had set down his loading equipment and was staring. 2 galactic conclave diplomats in gray robes near the entry gate had stopped walking. A pair of Solon merchants, who I had never once seen stop arguing in all my months on the station, were completely silent. Everyone was looking at me with the same expression, a combination of shock and something close to fear. The woman in the robes tilted her head very slowly. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, the kind of calm that did not come from ease, but from total, absolute control. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. I opened my mouth, then I closed it. Honestly, no, I did not. She looked important. Her robes alone were worth more than my yearly salary. Her attendants were armed and stood at perfect attention. The way everyone around us had reacted suggested she was someone significant. But I did not know her face. I did not recognize her insignia. And in that moment, with 28 minutes left on my timer, and a leaking hyperdrive waiting for me, I could not think of a single reason why it mattered. "You look important," I said carefully, "but I'm on a repair window. If you want to exchange information, I can do that after I finish this job." The sound that came from her nearest attendant was something between a gasp and a hiss. My comm unit buzzed on my collar so hard it almost vibrated off. I pressed it. "Osei." The voice of Commander Velasquez came through tight and urgent. "Osei, do not move. Do not say another word. The woman you are talking to is the matriarch queen of the Veth Dominion. Do you understand what I am telling you? Stand down. Apologize. Now." I stood there for a second, processing that. The Veth Dominion, 17 star systems, one of the oldest and most powerful governing bodies in this region of the galaxy. Their queen had lived for 4 centuries by Veth standards, and was, by every account I had ever heard, a figure of absolute authority in interstellar politics. Entire treaties had been rewritten because of her preferences. Ambassadors prepared for months before they were allowed to stand in her presence, and I had told her to watch where she was going. I took a slow breath. Her attendants had moved closer. Two of them had their hands near their sidearms, not drawing, but ready. The Queen herself had not moved. She was simply watching me with those steady eyes, waiting. This was the moment, I suppose, where most people would have collapsed into apologies, would have bowed so low their forehead touched the floor, would have said everything necessary to make the moment go away. Here is the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy had not quite figured out yet. We grew up on a planet with 8 billion people, 8 billion individuals, all of them busy, all of them convinced their own work mattered, all of them raised in cultures where you had to earn respect rather than simply inherit it. Our celebrities were local. Our leaders were argued with constantly. Our surgeons would stop a general mid-sentence to correct a wrong assumption. Our dock workers would tell a company president to move their vehicle because it was blocking the loading bay. We were, as a species, essentially incapable of being silenced by rank alone. Not because we were disrespectful, but because the part of our brain that was supposed to translate powerful person into stop thinking and obey had never quite developed properly. We saw a person first. The title came second. I looked at the Queen. She was watching me with an expression I could not fully read, something sharp and curious beneath the composure. I owe you an apology, I said. Not because of who you are, because I was short with you, and that wasn't right. I'm sorry for that. I paused. But I can't stop what I'm doing. There are 32,000 people on those 7 ships at Dock 14 through 20. They're running on backup life support right now, because the primary hyperdrive relay is compromised. If I don't finish this repair in the next 26 minutes, the convoy misses its launch window, and the backup systems on the older ships only hold for about 9 more hours after that. So I have to go back to work. I held her gaze. I hope you understand. Nobody spoke. The Queen looked at me for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes. Not anger, not offense, but something slower and more careful, like a thought turning over in a quiet mind. Then she did something that made every one of her attendants visibly tense. She stepped forward, alone, without them. She crouched beside the open conduit panel I had been working in, her extraordinary robes pooling on the station floor without her seeming to care about it, and she looked at the exposed relay system with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "What is the specific failure?" she asked. I blinked. "Secondary flux coupling. The Terran standard part is backordered. I've been trying to adapt a compatible substitute, but the fit isn't precise enough to guarantee a clean seal for a long jump." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stood, turned to the nearest attendant, and spoke 3 words in Veth, a language I did not know. Her voice was level and unhurried. The attendant hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then he moved. I went back to work. I did not know what was happening behind me. I focused on the relay, on the pressure calibration, on making sure the adapted part I had was seated as well as I could manage. 4 minutes later, something was placed beside my hand on the floor, a flux coupling. Veth manufacture by the look of the casing, smoother material, slightly different color, with the Dominion's technical mark stamped along one edge. I picked it up and checked the thread gauge. I checked the pressure tolerance rating. I checked the output compatibility. It was a match. Not exact. Veth and Terran Engineering used different baseline measurements, but close enough that with the right seal adapter, which I had in my kit, it would work. It would more than work. Veth couplings were built to higher tolerances than the Terran standard part I had originally needed. I looked up. The attendant who had delivered it gave me nothing. No expression, no gesture. He simply stepped back. I worked faster. 18 minutes later, I tightened the final connection, ran the diagnostic sequence, and watched the relay come online clean and steady. Green across every reading. Pressure holding. Flow rate normal. The low hum of the hyperdrive returning to full power moved through the floor of the bay like a slow, deep breath. I pressed my comm. "Ose, to convoy control. Relay is good. You are clear for departure sequence." The response came back immediately, the relief in the controller's voice so obvious it was almost funny. "Copy that, Ose. Thank you. Beginning departure in 8 minutes." I sat back on my heels and let out a long breath. When I stood and turned around, most of her attendants had relaxed slightly, though not much. The Queen was still there. She had not left. She was standing a few meters away, watching the ships at the far docks with an expression I could not name. I did the only thing that felt natural. I reached into the side pocket of my kit bag and pulled out my thermos. It was dented and scratched, a present from my grandmother in Accra, before I shipped out. Inside was coffee. Real coffee, not the station dispensary kind. She sent me a supply package every 3 months. I had been saving the last of this batch. Coffee? I offered. The Queen looked at the thermos, then at me. Then she reached out and took it. She drank. Her expression shifted. A small movement at the corners of her eyes. A slight adjustment of her posture. The coffee was strong. My grandmother did not believe in weak coffee. She handed the thermos back. "That is unusual," she said. "It's Ghanaian. From Earth. My grandmother makes the blend herself." She looked at the thermos for another moment. "May I have more?" I poured her another cup. We stood together at the edge of the docking bay and watched the 7 ships of the colonial convoy release from their berths, one by one, and move slowly out through the great open mouth of the station toward the dark between the stars. Their running lights were small and steady. 32,000 people, heading toward a new world. I did not find out the full picture until the debrief 2 days later. Commander Velasquez sat me down with the kind of expression that meant the news was either very bad or very complicated, and told me that the matriarch queen of the Veth Dominion had arrived at Conclave Station that day, intending to deliver a formal announcement. The Veth Dominion had been considering withdrawing from the Galactic Conclave, the alliance that held together trade, communication, and peacekeeping across this entire region of space. A withdrawal of that size would have caused a chain reaction. Other systems would have followed. The Conclave itself might not have survived it. She had arrived to announce the withdrawal. She did not. Her senior aide had passed a message to our diplomatic office. Unofficial, quiet, deliberately understated. The Queen had said she had been reminded, unexpectedly, of something she had not seen in a very long time. A being who did not know her name but still offered her coffee. The message said she intended to remain in the conclave. I sat in that room and did not know what to say. "You didn't save the alliance on purpose," Commander Velasquez told me. Her voice had the tone of someone who was still trying to decide whether to laugh or to be very serious. "You didn't even know what was at stake. I just needed to fix the relay," I said. She rubbed her forehead. "I know." And she walked through my toolbox. "I know, Osei. I thought about it for a while after that. About what the aide had said. About a 400-year-old queen who controlled 17 star systems, standing on a docking bay floor in her expensive robes, holding a dented thermos of Ghanaian coffee, and watching a convoy of ordinary people head toward an ordinary future. I thought about what it must be like to live that long, in that much power, and to forget that most of the universe was not made of politics and ceremony, that most of it was made of people with deadlines and bleeding knuckles and thermoses of strong coffee, and 32,000 strangers they had never met, but were trying their hardest to keep alive. I thought that maybe the most dangerous thing a human could be, in the eyes of the rest of the galaxy, was not aggressive or stubborn or impossible to kill. Maybe it was simply genuine. I went back to work the next morning. There was a water recycler on the station's east ring that needed attention. And after that, a ventilation fault in Corridor 7. Nobody important was likely to walk through my toolbox again. But I kept the thermos full, just in case.